So my paper was in 2015 about the fascia and this fluid-filled highway which coats the whole body. Everything. And now they consider a new organ, the largest organ in the body, which is this fluid-filled highway. They never realized it existed because by the time they did autopsies, it was flat. They thought it was a flat sheet because it really is all that's in the middle of there is fluids. When it comes down, the fluids go out. So they thought it was a flat sheet. And I could see, no, it wasn't. In my mud fossils, I could see this layer very clearly. And then somebody wrote a paper somewhere in 2015. My paper was out in 2015, but I was researching this long before that. And I know exactly what that layer does. They decided, well, we found a new layer, but they don't know what it does. I know exactly what it does. It carries all the enzymes, bacteria, and all of this is your immune system. Just take it from there. And it's powered by bacterial enzymes. Bacteria create the enzymes do the work. Simple as that. All right, I just want to address this because I had somebody say, oh, Roger's lying. He discovered the interstitium. Well, I did discover it. And I worked with this guy, Gil Hedley. This is 16 years ago. He did the fuzz speech. And he was the only guy I could find that had any knowledge whatsoever of the interstitium. He's an autopsy guy. So I get a hold of him. Gil and I worked a little bit. And then, you see, it's all about fuzz, fascia, all that stuff. Listen to this. 13 years ago, Gil Hedley reconsidering the fuzz. Yes, because it wasn't just fuzz. When I first talked to him, he says, oh, yeah, they just cut that out and throw it away. I said, no, this stuff is important. And that's what they used to do. Now, just to elaborate on this, I approached everybody in the world about fascia because nobody understood it. The only people that were even thinking about it were the people that were in sports injuries. And, of course, Gil does the autopsies. Now, he's deep into this fascia because fascia controls your whole body, and nobody really understood it. They think you can manipulate it and you'll feel better and this and that, and yes, you can, because the fascia is where all these fluids are flowing through there. There's little pressure points, there's little acupuncture points and so forth that I think they are truly what they have talked about for all these ancient cultures. This is all fuzz, fascia, fuzz, fascia. This was fabulous. This is strolling under the skin. Dr. Jean-Claude Guberteau. And this is how your fascia slides. It's absolutely fabulously done. And they go in and they watch how your body, look at this, look. Whoops, oh shit, I'm sorry. Here it goes. This is what's happening inside your body. Those are tendons. And they're sliding through all this goop. And still nobody really recognized what it did. All right, this is just beyond cool. This is that free venous flap. Now, I have one up in my microscope here. That's a flap. I mean, it's just impossible to miss. This is the flap. Now, I showed you how those tubes are supposed to be coming down, and those tubes come into the next organ that the flap attaches to. Well, here's the two spots right here. You see the two spots? Oops, right there and right there. You see it? Now there's also could be a red spot here too. It's hard to tell, but that is this free venous flap. Now, I named this the Spurlock, but I guess it's a venous flap, so I guess I have to give up on that. But this is the lock. That locks that latch right into this piece of meat using all those tendons. You see those tendinous, strappy things? Those are connective tissue, very, very tough. And you see the black tube coming down into here? That's the venous stuff. Veins are black. That's the venous stuff, right down into the drain. You see it? Now, as we get back from all of this really tough, gnarly stuff, we get into that really thin, it's still fascia, but it's just barely thin. You see this? Here's where all the vein is dumping into its end point right down here to those tubes from this flap. I mean, I'm glad this guy attacked me, because I wouldn't have gone back to this, because I like I showed you before, I think I started with Gil Headley about this, and he is the only single one that would discuss this, other than to sort of say I took credit for it, and he should have had credit for it. Other people have written papers about it saying, I discovered this, I discovered that. Well, that's okay, I don't care. Let's just get it done and figure out what's going on here. That's all I'm about. And Gil is the best. I love you, brother. And he advises, well, he doesn't advise me. I just ask him questions, and he answers me. Well, I don't know. Or, he tells me what he's found. That's all. And I ask him if he could look into this or that. And does what I'm saying make sense? And so far, he's never said no. All right, so that's the flap we're talking about right there, and those are the two little dots. I don't see how that could be missed. Now let me show you the chicken shots, and this is where I think there could be some kind of an organish thing right down in this area. Let's take a look. Okay, so this is the flap from a chicken breast. Now this one here is the flap I just showed you before in the microscope, and it has the two tubes coming down just like this does. Now this would be upside down. It's coming this, the flap is going that way. Now, the way it sounds to me from the papers I read, which I didn't get real detailed into it, but it sounds to me like they just jump right into each other, and the fluids just spontaneously fill up immediately. Visually, they can see these fluids. This is one tube, and this is the other tube. Now, here's the interesting thing. It appears to me there is a little bit of whatever this is running out of here into what looks to me like may even be some form of an organ, or some form of a thing that grabs out and grabs onto the next fascia, because I believe it instantly reconfigures itself. And that was what I had picked up from the conversations I had with the people, mostly sports injury people. But this, I think, is a byproduct of this. It's not just a little chunk of meat hanging off there. I think this fed this, and then this tube right here runs into the next organ. That's all I can see from here, because I can see it coming in here and doing something in this little glob of stuff. And then it comes through that, it looks to me like a tube, and right out the... That's all I can take from this. And nobody knows anything about this, so I'm just guessing. I think this is meat here, yes. But that flap has now invested into this other organ from wherever the chicken breast attaches. Everything attaches to something else. Like, I think this, quite obviously muscle, and it's red muscle. This was from, but that's all you have left here is, I think they call it the plexus or the pleural. No, it's not pleural. Anyway, whatever it is, it's the rubbery spot at the end of your chicken you don't usually eat. And that would be the same thing here. The spurlock is that spot where at the top that snaps this in. So there would have been one up here. All right, and I'm sure I spit it all. And the rest continues on. It's all falling into place. You know, on the spur of the moment, I decided you should see this, because you're mud fossil people. You're going to see these things solidified. Now watch, this is from UKY ortho. Look at this, fabulous. I refer to it in my Mudfossil videos. That was 5 years ago. I do this, anyway. Here she is talking about the fascia. Now, pay close attention to this. I'll stop it here and there if something has to be spoken of.
The story of this film began about 20 years ago. We were transferring vascularized turkey tendons in our university research lab.
Hold on a second, let me put on closed captions. Now, underneath here you're going to see tendons and blood vessels and all kinds of different tissue. Every single tissue is coated with this interstitium. And it stretches and pulls and weaves and comes back and boom, and if it gets ripped, boom, it fixes itself almost instantaneously. Now watch.
And we're struck by the intricacy of the vascular network. Thereafter, the Chinese school of plastic surgery discovered the notion of the retrograde flap, and we began to develop a technique for transferring vascularized retrograde tendon flexor transfers onto the cubital pedicle to get round the problem of reconstructing flexor tendons. Little by little, this new vision of anatomy began to throw light on the relationships between the tendons, the sliding sheaths, and the vessels.
I need to make a point right now. There, I believe, I know I can't really tell, to be honest with you, but in the experiments I have done, I think there's an organ right in here between two different body parts. In other words, the liver and the kidneys. Let's say they attach. I don't know if they do or not, but let's say they vascularly attach. There will be a difference in these two tubes. And one of them, I think, has a little organ in it. And you see that black dot right there? I think that's the heart of this little organ. And one tube goes this way and one tube goes that way to feed your new interstitium. Because it can't be the same chemistry on both of them. This is where it gets confusing. I probably shouldn't I'm just going to keep going. Okay, I was attacked. Called a liar that I didn't discover the interstitium. Well, I did, and I studied it very well, and I know exactly what it does. And now I have also found another body part which connects the interstitium, these venous valves. Free venous flaps, well, flaps, but I think they're also valves, and I think they may have an organ attached to each one of these that regulates what kind of fluid is going to go into what kind of organ, although they may just be, well, let me show you what I did discover in a microscope and so forth, but these are not understood right now. So these are free venous flaps. Well, what does that mean? Venous fluids are the stuff that comes back to your heart to get recharged. It's all used up. There's also something called lymph fluids. That works with the veins. Now, in what manner, I'm not 100% sure. I can see it actually working with veins and the lymph coating the veins and the veins absorbing whatever's left over in that lymph and letting the lymph continue on. Is that the organ? I don't know, but we're going to look. Here's what they say about this organ, about these flaps. Retrograde free venous flaps represent a separate entity among free venous flaps. All right, they're separate. There's other venous flaps that attach veins. This is a different deal. The physiology is still unclear. So nobody really understands about it. This is from 2022. And again, this guy attacked me saying, I'm a liar. Well, I'm glad that he did because I missed this. This is from 2022. And you can't keep up on everything. But they did, and this is because of transplants. I think maybe I mentioned that. I don't know. I get confused as I go along here. But the whole deal here is, the physiology is still unclear. They don't understand it, basically. But they provide an immediate, visible refill after reconnection. That's the fluids, the lymph fluids. They fill right back up instantly. It's exactly what I said in my paper from 2015. I said they immediately reconfigure themselves. Anyway, with a similar behavior to conventional flaps. All right, so they integrate right back into each other. They just know how to connect together, and it's a giant fluid-filled highway. And you know, you can't shut down the highway. You got to keep it going. If you can't coat that organ that you just transplanted with these interstitial fluids, you're done. Won't last a day. You have to have it filled up, and it is instantly provide an immediate, visible refill after reconnection. And but they don't know exactly how. So anyway, therefore, the dimension indications of these flaps can be extended beyond what was previously believed. They can be easily customized. Well, I don't know about that, including with respect to tendons and nerves. Nevertheless, they are still debated and regarded as unsafe. I don't know about that. And then it goes on and on. But these are the free venous flaps, and they started in 2012 up to 2019, looking at these things basically because they still don't understand them. It's something pretty new. I'll show you what I found in mine. They're looking at more complicated than me. But this is what I'm looking at. Where it comes in, where one organ meets another organ, you got these little squiggles coming in here. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 3. You got to have at least 2. And it looks to me like they're saying one goes in and one comes out. I don't know. But I could consider that probably true. But I'm going to show you the flaps that I have here. I got one here, and this is why I found this stuff, because of the Mudfossils. If it wasn't for the Mudfossils, none of this would be known. They'd still be looking at this and saying, well, what does that do? And they are. All right, so don't forget, you have to have these fluids going from one to another body part through this flap. It just has to happen. I'm going to show you this in a microscope. It's very clearly seen. Now, as they say, in case of insufficient revascularization of the flap, in other words, it doesn't get vitality, a blocking valve before the flap can be the cause. Now, let's look at what these flaps look like. All right. I think I've shown you my paper, or will. The interstitium is a recently characterized organ-like structure identified in 2018 study. It refers to a network of fluid-filled spaces, yes, found throughout the body, covers the entire body, yes, particularly beneath the skin, around organs, along blood vessels and muscles, everything. You're coated everywhere, 100%. And what does it do? They say it acts as a shock absorber. Well, interstitium fluid-filled compartments help cushion organs, muscles, and vessels, potentially protecting them from mechanical stress. Originally, that's what they thought. It was just fuzz. It didn't have any other purpose. It plays a role in fluid transport, absolutely. It's a conduit. It's a fluid-filled highway. And it goes helping move fluids between tissue and the lymphatic system. Absolutely. That's exactly the whole main purpose here. It makes it important in maintaining fluid balance in the body, yes, but not only fluid balance, it's enzymes. Now, it supports the immune function. That's its primary job. That is its primary job. Interstitial spaces may help in transporting immune cells. No, they absolutely do. Contributing to immune surveillance and response, yes. And they respond intelligently. Possible role in cancer spread. It's less in spread than it is in invasion. That interstitial highway is a barrier between everything out there that's bad and everything that's below there that you have to take care of and maintain, which is your body. If that layer is bad, you get cancer. That's an invasion. Any invasive disease is an invasion of a membrane. And this is what we're talking about, a membrane. So that's the most important thing for the whole thing. Cancer cells, they say, oh, there's a bad cancer here and it goes somewhere else. I have a different opinion of that. My opinion is that cancer, if you're not protected here, you're not going to be protected there. Here you get cancer, sooner or later it picks up somewhere else. It doesn't go from here and jump over to there. No. It will spread in one area and get bigger and bigger and bigger, yes. Because that area is specifically vulnerable. But then it doesn't just send out bad guys everywhere. I don't think. I could be wrong. But I would like to see some evidence of actual cancer cells, finding them in the blood, something like that. I would like to see that, because cancer is an invasion. See, here's what I'm talking about. It's just recently identified, because the traditional preparation of tissues for microscopic analysis, they drain away all the fluids out of the body, and then they look at the tissues. Yeah. It collapsed fluid. Just like this. Hold on. Let's take this mud fossil. And they get it into the lab, and here's the guy's body. They would just crush this, and that fluid, which is nothing but fluid, basically, it's almost 100% fluid, it's squirt out. It's lymph fluid. In your lymphatic system, as I understand it, you have 4 times more fluid in this layer here than you have in your whole body of blood. 4 times more. You see these layers? Those layers aren't there by sedimentation. It's just crazy to ignore this forever. And at any rate, it's exhausting to do this for this many years. And this is so important, and they still do not understand it. They just still don't understand it. You know, I made a mistake. I admit I was wrong. They're talking about metastasized cancer, where it spreads around the body. And yes, I do agree that's very likely, because they do actually have cancer cells in the bloodstream. They can see them. And cancer is an invasive enzyme, bacteria, and it digs through the membrane. All right, so I was wrong. They can take up residence somewhere else once they shed in this lymphatic fluids. All right, and they shed into the fluid. Cancer cells spread, and I can agree with that, but why would they spread, and why did they take up residence in the first place? You had no chemistry to fight back, and the only chemistry you have that can fight back against them, in my mind, is enzymes. And the only way you can get those is from bacteria. And the bacteria make the enzymes in your body. They should grow naturally, and it should take care of itself. Now, they have found that fecal matter transplants, which should be called bacterial transplants, they replace the good bacteria in your body, and they've had very good success with it, especially in C. difficile, which you can't hardly fix. But you have to go through the drugs first, for why, I don't know, before they'll let you have that FMT. And once you have that, it's pretty well all done. Not only that, they found that it cured a whole batch of other things that these people had problems with, right up the line. So we need to repopulate the bacteria, and that's what I understand about the fascia and about this fluid-filled highway. I understand this very well. I've studied this more than these doctors. They said, whoa, we found a new layer in the body. Well, fine. What does it do? How does it work? What can you do to affect that and to maintain health in there? And then there's a lot of other things that come about. You're talking about a lot of things that are affected. I mean, a lot. You know, what about tattoos? You know, there's all kinds of stuff that nobody wants to talk about. Well, I talk about whatever is important to talk about. It's people don't want to hear anything other than their side of the opinion, and it's all opinion now. I'm finding that there's very, very, very little that is locked in stone. However, my stuff is locked in stone.